So in a lot of my budgeting videos, I've spoken about sinking funds. So if you don't know what sinking fund is, you're basically just putting money away for something. But the one thing that I don't think I've really done is actually talk through in detail what sinking funds are, why they're important, and how you can actually start to create those sinking funds. So I wanted to dedicate a whole video just really explaining what sinking funds are and how you can actually use them. Because for me, when it comes to sorting out your finances, then sinking funds can be very, very useful. But before we get into that, I already know you want to, so you may as well hit that like button whilst you're here, because it does really help to support the channel. Okay, Bronya, I've heard you mention sinking funds before, so what exactly are they? So in case you're new to my channel, I like to look at Google definitions first, because a lot of the times they don't really make sense to me, so I like to read out the definitions and then try to explain it in more detail from my personal perspective. So Wikipedia says, a sinking fund is a fund established by an economic entity by setting aside a revenue over a period of time to fund a future capital expense or repayment of a long-term debt. What? Yeah, sometimes I do find Wikipedia just quite confusing. And really, when I tried to Google sinking funds, a lot of the results came up with companies that use sinking funds rather than individuals using sinking funds. So I wasn't entirely surprised at what Wikipedia was saying, to be honest. But most of us aren't whole companies, so how can we actually use sinking funds for ourselves? So essentially, when I'm thinking about sinking funds, I'm really just thinking about saving money over time for a particular thing. So you might be setting money aside for something every month or every week, and that's going to be for a variety of things, so maybe different expenses. Now, how I like to think about it is I'm going to be saving money over time for some planned expenses. So these might include things like Christmas, maybe birthdays, if you want to save up for a holiday, any car maintenance. So for example, if you know you're going to need to buy new tires or you've got an MOT, so things like that. It might also include saving up for clothes or even just general stuff that you need to buy in your house. So because they're planned expenses and you know that they're coming, it means that you can set a plan and then you can just start saving little by little. But if they're planned expenses, why would you bother saving it up over time? Why would you not just buy it that one time? Well, really it's because with most people, when they do have to pay for that expense, they won't actually have the money because they haven't planned for that expense. So it means that you might find people are having to go into debt just to finance that cost. How much for all the presents? Well, I guess that's what a credit card is used for, right? So really having a sinking fund allows you to be a lot more organized. Obviously, it means you're going to be intentional as well. And I think it just takes a whole load of stress off you, because if it means you just have to save little by little each month, you're probably not even going to feel it very much. And then when it gets to the point where you do have to pay for that expense, you're probably going to feel just a lot better because your money is basically saved up. And so rather than having to use your whole paycheck to pay for that expense, or worse, getting into debt to pay for that expense, you've already saved up for everything and it's just all good. Okay, I get it. So what's the difference between a sinking fund and an emergency fund? Now guys, if you didn't know, sinking funds are for planned expenses, whereas emergency funds are not. So please remember that. When it comes to emergency funds, those are going to be for emergencies, okay? So when something unexpected happens, then yes, you would use your emergency fund, because again, it's an emergency. Now I do have a video talking about how you can actually start to build your emergency fund if you haven't already. So of course, I will link that up here for you and in the description below. But when it comes to sinking funds, ideally you should know exactly what you're paying for so that you can plan accordingly. So for example, you probably have an idea about when you'll need to change your tires eventually on your car. So personally, I would not consider that as an emergency. And the same goes with any holidays or presents or anything like that. That is not an emergency, that is a planned expense. Why can't a holiday be considered an emergency? I need the sun and the sea, okay? I need to rest. So guys, make sure you know the difference, because ideally, if it was me, I would be prioritizing my emergency fund first before I start thinking about other sinking funds. Again, because it's for genuine emergencies. So how do I even start creating a sinking fund? Okay, so the first thing I would do is try to figure out what your expenses are likely to be over the next year, or at least over the next few months. And I would then write that down. So for example, if you celebrate Christmas, then Christmas comes every single year. And if you're planning on buying presents, then yes, that's going to be an expense or a sinking fund that you might want to save up for. The second thing I would do is, once you've got a list of your expenses, then you just need to work out how much it's likely to cost and how much you'll need to save. So if you've paid for these things before, then it might be worth looking at your past bank statements, for example. So as a lot of you guys will know, when I try to explain things, I do like to give examples because I think it just makes life a whole lot easier. So of course, let's just go through step by step what I would be doing if I wanted to create my first sinking fund. So the first thing I would probably be doing is trying to figure out what I want to save for. So I would probably first have a plan, hopefully, but if you don't really know, then I would maybe look at my past bank statements, maybe look at what you've been paying for monthly that you might want to pay yearly, for example, or if you know that there's something happening. So for example, let's say that you know you're going to need to get Christmas presents, you're probably going to need to get some birthday or anniversary presents down the line. You might also have a car, so you might want to create a sinking fund for any car maintenance stuff, so things like, you know, MOT, road coverage and all of that good stuff, which by the way, can be expensive. And you know what? Let's even say that we're going to go on a cheeky holiday this year. And in this example, we're considering that you have no consumer debt, because I would not be going on a cheeky holiday if I racked up credit card debt. So I would really just be listing out the expenses for the year. So when it comes to things like Christmas and birthday presents, it might be worth checking your bank statements maybe from last year and just seeing how much you spent. So for example, if you spent £300 on Christmas presents last year, then maybe you might want to do something similar this year. I would also try to be realistic as well, okay? So if you spent £500 last year, but your goal this year is about £50, that might be slightly difficult to do. So just make sure it's realistic, especially if you plan on buying similar presents. And then obviously with things like holidays, that's probably going to be slightly easier, because hopefully you would have the total cost for that holiday. And then again, with things like car maintenance or anything else, if you don't know completely what it's likely to be, then it might just be worth doing a rough estimate. Sometimes I will Google, you know, how much does road tax cost for this year or for the car. So hopefully you might be able to get a bit of an idea on the cost, but again, just have a rough estimate and then you can just tweak as you go. And then the next thing is, once you've obviously figured out your expense and how much you need to save, then you need to work out how long you have to save for it. So is it 3 months or 6 months, or maybe it's even the whole year? So then the next thing is, once you know exactly how long you have to save for it, you can then just divide that sinking fund by the number of months. Now, if you do have my budgeting template, then you probably already know that I do have a sinking fund calculator in there. So all you would need to do is just add in the total amount that you're going to be saving for, then just add in the months that you're going to start saving and the month that you want it to end, and then it will just calculate it all for you. So it will tell you exactly how much you need to be saving each month. And if you are interested in getting my budget template, I do have a monthly and weekly one, so I will link that in the description below. And then once you've done all of that, then make sure to include it in your monthly or weekly budget. And if you haven't got a budget, then I would definitely recommend one. I do have videos on different budgeting techniques that you can use so that you can find out which is best for you. So of course, those will be linked up here for you and in the description below. And then once you've included that in your budget, the next thing I would be doing is just creating a separate savings pot for it. So really, if it was me, I would just have a separate pot for each category. So you might have a pot for Christmas, you might have a pot for any holidays, you might have a pot for clothes, for example. So then it means every single month, you're just adding money into each separate pot. Now I use Monzo for this, but what I think I'll do is next month when I do my budget update, I'll explain it in a bit more detail how I use Monzo to create my separate pots for those sinking funds. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, then make sure you do so you don't miss out, and click that bell notification below whilst you are down there. Yeah, that sounds quite straightforward. So why doesn't everyone do it? Well, it's probably because it can take a little bit of time to really figure out how much you need to save. And maybe a lot of people just don't want to do that. I mean, I could start saving up for Christmas, but I feel like I've got ages. Why did I not save earlier? But I know that if you're watching this video, you are completely different and you actually want to take control of your finances. So I have no doubt that you'll be starting this as soon as possible. Plus, I also think it's a major benefit to do this as well. So I'm all for it. But for me, creating sinking funds has just been a game changer for me. So I would definitely recommend it. But if you did like this video, then make sure to give it a thumbs up if you haven't already. And let me know in the comments, am I the only one who uses sinking funds, or do you use it as well? I do post every Tuesday and Friday. So if you would like to know more, then feel free to subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys on Tuesday.